Good morning, afternoon or evening, and welcome to Faction Overview number 7, and with this we move over halfway through the entire series, so thanks for following for this long. Anyway, let's see what we have this week, and it is indeed going to be North Africa's nemesis of the ancient Greeks and Romans, and that is, for the uninitiated, the Carthaginians. So what can we say about the Carthaginians? Well, that's not just a rhetorical question. I'm literally going to tell you all about it over the next few minutes. Now, the first thing to mention is they were actually my favourite faction when I first started playing 0 AD. However, I quickly abandoned them for the far easier to play with Britons. But they're not as useless as you may think from that little anecdote, as we'll see. So let's have a look at some of their main attributes. Now, number one is that they have really strong walls, like really strong walls. In fact, they're 3 times the strength of any other faction, but because of that, they take over twice as long to build. Secondly, they have a big reliance on mercenaries, and that's probably more so than any other faction except maybe the Kushites and Ptolemies. They also have a specific building to train them in, embassies, and we're going to hear a lot about those a little bit later. Thirdly, they're the game's naval specialists, as they have a pretty decent navy, a specialist building just for their ships, and a couple of really good upgrades for water-based maps. But again, we'll hear about that a bit more later. And finally, their temples are very important, but not in the way you'd expect. They actually used to train Carthage's champions, and with the right upgrade they can be built pretty quickly, allowing you to spew out those champions like there's no tomorrow, assuming of course you can find the resources. So first up, let's discuss the building that I just alluded to, the Naval Shipyard. Now this allows you to build ships in much the same way that you would from a dock, but it also gives you access to Carthage's heaviest ship, the Quinquereme. Now this alone makes it worth having, but on top of that it also acts like a ship temple where you can garrison up to 5 ships to be healed at 10 hit points per second. When you consider that it also has a couple of upgrades that we're going to cover later in the video, this building is basically what makes Carthage considered the naval specialists. The second set of unique buildings you're going to find are the embassies. Now there are 3 of these, and these are absolutely critical if you're going to get some kind of variety and a more rounded army that's capable of both defence and attack. Now they come in 3 flavours, and these are Italian, Iberian and Celtic, and they have mercenaries from each of these factions within them. However, while they expand your available troop types significantly, you can only build 2 of them at any one point. So let's move on to units, where we'll see what things they offer. Before we go on to the embassy units, let's have a look at those that you start with, and that's an archer and a spearman, which is a reasonably strong defensive setup, although it also gives you some potential for long-range harassment with the archers if you can get enough of them quickly enough, and particularly if you can get some watchtowers built on your enemy borders. Now your cavalryman's a skirmisher, and that's nicely rounded for attack and defence, but you probably don't care too much about the starting troops, to be honest, so let's have a look at what happens when phase 2 arrives. Now I've already mentioned that you're going to get embassies, and these provide access to most remaining troop types. And these are, well, from the Italian embassy you're going to have a sword infantry and a lancer cavalry. From the Iberian one we have a skirmisher, slinger and a sword cavalry. And finally from the Celtic embassy, a swordsman and a sword cavalry. Now each of these troops have all the standard attributes and are consistent with costs, so you'll notice that this means that the troops do overlap between embassy. For exactly this reason, my recommendation is going to be to grab the Iberian and Italian embassy, because that gives you access to all of the troops. However, if there's a specific soldier that you want to lose a lot, then you may want to get 2 of the same ones. However, Iberian and Italian offer all the troops available, so as I said before, that's my advice in the beginning. Now this section is going to be relatively short, but there's a pretty decent mixture of siege weapons for these guys. Now in terms of range, you've got the bolt thrower and the catapult, and they work really well together, as well as war elephants if you want more of a shock attack. Now they're all fairly decent as the range goes, and you can't really complain about them. Now obviously the majority of your siege weapons are stationary, and that means they work best in a slow attack or as part of a defensive operation. So once again, if you're looking to play a defensive game with a slow grinding attack, well, it could just be that Carthage are your guys. In terms of champions, there are just the 2. You've got an infantry spearman and a lancer cavalry, and as these are basically just standard, the most interesting thing about them is that they're trained in the temple, which we've already established. So let's just look at them in a bit more detail anyway. Sacred Band of Baal, they're your infantry spearmen. They've got standard champion stats, which means they've got reasonable but not exceptional close quarter attack against all enemies except for cavalry, for whom they'll have the 3 times bonus. Now the Sacred Band of Astarte are similar in that they're standard champion spear cavalry, so they have a 1.5 times bonus against other cavalry, and they also take 2 seconds between each attack, means that they're ideal for hit and run, but they're pretty poor if you leave them to get involved in hand-to-hand fighting, so hit and run it is. Very much hit and run, that's the order of the day. And so to heroes. Hannibal Barca is your main chap here. He's an elephant hero that offers a 20% attack bonus and a +1 capture bonus, and not just to your own troops but also to allied troops, and that makes a nice bonus that makes him a particularly good option when you're playing team games. On top of that, elephant heroes are just great, so I like him, and he also went over the Alps, and that's a pretty decent achievement by anyone's measure. Now Namaho is a decent spearman cavalry, and he gives 30% attack bonus to all melee cavalry within 60 metres. Now it's a pretty good bonus if you want to go raiding in an enemy's base to kill their farmers and nearby woodcutters, and he also offers a change of pace from the slower, more methodical approach that generally Carthage will take. Hamilcar Barca is a cavalry swordsman who has 2 bonuses, but he's probably still my least favourite hero. Bonus number 1 reduces enemy mercenaries attack by 20%, which obviously requires your enemy to use mercenaries. So basically this bonus is only really going to offer something against Ptolemies, Macedonians, another Carthage player, or to a lesser extent the Cushites. His second bonus is better. Now this increases speed for soldiers and siege engines by 25%. However, as your siege is pretty stationary, unless he's going to escort all your catapults to the front line, it's once again not the greatest of bonuses. In all, he's definitely my least favourite of the heroes on offer. Now, before we get to the conclusions, let's just have a look at the unique upgrades that are available to the Carthaginians. Now, Exploration's the first upgrade we're going to look at. It's available from the Naval Shipyard, and it gives all traders and ships a 25% vision bonus. And that's a pretty cheap upgrade, so it's well worth getting, as the extra vision on the naval maps will be a massive help. Next up, we've got Colonization, and it's available at Phase 2 from the Civic Centre. It reduces build time for civic centres, houses and temples by 25%, but it's quite pricey at 500 wood and 500 metal. Now I can see how it could be useful for the chance to spit out champions from multiple temples, but it's just still a bit expensive for my taste. Now Phoenician Naval Architects is essentially the batch training upgrade that's available for your soldiers in the barracks, but it's for boats. And it's cheap, it's worth 200 each of wood and metal. Now I think it's a fantastic upgrade, so make sure you get this one as soon as you hit Phase 3. And the final one is the standard mercenary promotion to advanced rank that all mercenary-rich factions have. Now I've mentioned it many times before, but it makes your soldiers stronger and gives them more health, but it also reduces their ability to collect resources. So it's all in all a very worthwhile upgrade. So that's that for the details, but what does it all add up to? Well, let's find out by summing them all up like a big 0 AD obsessed calculator would. Firstly, the obvious fact that we're going to go over is that they're naval specialists, so if you're on a naval map, then you know you're going to be at your best. So on those maps, first up you want to get that Naval Shipyard and its upgrades as soon as possible. Secondly, know which embassies suit you best and get them built as soon as you hit Phase 2. You're going to need that additional troop variation as soon as possible, so get the embassies built fast. Number 3 is to build temples near the front line, and don't be afraid to build more than one. After all, they're also potentially a barracks full of champions. Number 4, be prepared to defend to begin with and expand slowly. A rolling catapult and bolt thrower manoeuvre at Phase 3 can be just the ticket for breaking out after establishing a solid base. And finally, while you can set up very defensively, don't just sit there. If you choose the Italian embassy, then a pack of Lancer cavalry, potentially led by Mahabal, can really disrupt your enemy's economy, which will sorely help with that breakout. And that's that again. That's 7 down and 6 to go. So thanks for staying with me while I adjust to fatherhood and changes at work, and I hope to be putting out another one of these faction videos in the next few weeks, which will hopefully keep your appetite sated. So until then, muito obrigado and adeus.